one little book that changed the world. How's that happen exactly? How could one little book have such a big impact on a country and even on the world? I want to share something with you might already know about. The book, in case you don't know, is Common Sense by Thomas Paine. And here's how popular it was. By the end of 1776, when it was originally written, it's estimated that 1 in 5 Americans had read the book. No other book has ever reached so many people so quickly. No other book has had such a profound impact on a country. No other book has had such a profound impact on the principles of freedom and proper government. 1 in 5 people, 20% of the population. Think about the impact of that. It's unheard of today. And it was so popular that newspapers printed the entire book and put it into circulation that way. So the real numbers of how many people it actually reached might even be much higher. Maybe you never heard of Common Sense by Thomas Paine, but that doesn't change the fact that it remains today the best-selling American title of all time. What was it about? Why was it so important? How did it impact America? And why would anybody care today? Here's why Common Sense was the most influential book about freedom ever created. The book at its core, the essence of the book, is a call for independence from Britain. But here's the thing. The Declaration of Independence had already been signed, and the Revolutionary War was already well underway. So why was this book needed? If the Declaration of Independence had been signed and the Revolutionary War had been declared and already begun, why would a book to convince the people that independence was necessary be needed? The simple answer to that is division. The country was very divided, meaning, and this might blow your mind, that there was a lot of people in the colonies that didn't want independence. They didn't want to be independent from Britain. You had half, maybe more than half, of the population of the colonies fighting for the other side. And that's why this book is so important. It made the case for freedom. It made the case for independence. And it did it in plain language and simple arguments. And here's the big thing. It explained why. And that is so important. And that's one of the reasons I believe it's still an important book today. To understand why our government is the way it is. To understand why we have principles like the proper limitation of government. To understand why the Constitution says the things it does. So even today, this is very important reading. But it was necessary because of all the division. Here you had a war going on, and half the country supporting the other side. That's more divided than we could ever imagine today. And so this book became essential to explaining to people what was needed, why independence was so important, and what a proper form of government should look like. Here's the problem with the book. It was written 250 years ago. And this is the problem with what Thomas Paine wrote. And you might be thinking, well, wait a minute. No, it's not a problem with what he wrote. It's a problem with how he wrote it. 250 years ago, the language was a lot different. There was different terms, a different grammar style, a different speaking style, all so completely different that it might as well be a different language. It's almost impossible to understand. And that's why I translated it. Let me tell you a little bit about what I'm talking about. Here, Thomas Paine is talking about the origin of government, which is a very important thing to understand, to really understand how government works. Where did it all begin? How did government come about in the first place? And here's what he wrote. This is his original text. Thus necessity, like a gravitating power, would soon form our newly arrived emigrants into society, the reciprocal blessings of which would supersede and render the obligations of law and government unnecessary while they remained perfectly just to each other. But as nothing but heaven is impregnable to vice, it will unavoidably happen that in proportion as they surmount the first difficulties of emigration, which bound them together in a common cause, they will begin to relax in their duty and attachment to each other. And this reminiscence will point out the necessity of establishing some form of government to supply the defect of moral virtue. Whew! I don't know about you, but to me that's nearly impossible to understand. Here's what he's trying to say, and here's what it says translated into modern English. Out of necessity, people are pulled together to take advantage of each other's talents and abilities. In the beginning, they rely on each other, So there's no need for laws in government. Over time, however, selfishness and laziness settle in. People grow complacent. As a second group of people begins providing a disproportionate amount of work, they begin to see the need to establish some form of government to correct the unfairness. There, you can understand an important premise. Government exists in part to protect fairness, and he makes the point that it's selfishness and laziness that creates the unfairness. That's something that's important for people to realize. It's as important now as it was then. He also then talks about personal responsibility. And here's what he wrote about that. This is his original text again. Mankind being originally equals in order of creation, the equality could only be destroyed by some subsequent circumstance. The distinctions of rich and poor may in great measure be accounted for, and that without having recourse to harsh sounding names of oppression and avarice, oppression is sometimes the consequence, but seldom or never the means of riches, and although avarice will preserve a man from being necessitously poor, it generally makes him too timorous to be wealthy. Necessitously? That's not even a word that's used anymore. Very difficult, if not impossible, to understand what he's trying to say there, looking at the original text. Here's what it says translated. Men were originally created equal, and that quality could only be destroyed by some subsequent circumstance. That some people are rich and some people are poor is explainable, even though it follows misery and oppression. Selfish preservation is what keeps a man from being so poor he's destitute, but it's also what makes him fearful of taking the risks needed to be wealthy. So what he's saying there is that we are responsible for our success and failures. That's pretty radical in today's age where so many people are looking to government for answers. Hopefully you get the idea of what the translated version looks like compared to the original text and how much easier it is to understand. The principles argued in Common Sense are timeless and they're as important today as ever. The book was written at a time when the country was divided as ever, and Thomas Paine used logic and reason to convince people to rally behind the idea of freedom, something that's important for people all over the world all the time. We need that today. We need it as much as ever. Here's a few basic principles I want to share with you that come from the book. One of the first that he points out is that just because something is popular doesn't make it right. In today's age of social media and internet and syndication and cable news, we see things that you think are popular or seem to be popular or people seem to agree with. None of that makes it right. And he makes that important point all the way back 250 years ago. He says that enough time without questioning leads to acceptance. And what he's trying to say, I think, is that people need to be continually asking and understanding why things are the way they are. Without understanding why, we can't fully appreciate, we can't fully get behind what it is that the principles stand for, and at the same way, we can't guard against challenges to those principles. He says that an abuse of power that causes oppression will eventually be called into question, that people will eventually revolt against it. And I think we see some of that going on today. He says that power isn't assumed, but given away. And this is another important element that carries into the Constitution, that this is a government of we the people, a government of the people by the people. That's what it was designed to be. He says that a discussion of principles is more productive than an attack on people. Boy, if we could follow that today. We see just the opposite going on today. Every day we see it with our political leaders that they're attacking each other. Who benefits from that? It's not us. He says that the cause of freedom is a cause for all people all over the world. That's as true today as it ever was, and it always will be. He says the principles of freedom are universal. And our Constitution defines that. And you see people wanting to challenge that because they don't understand why. He says that the taking of rights, especially by force, is something that all people should be concerned about, regardless of who they identify with. He's making the point that right is right, and he explains why. He says society Is everything constructive and good that people join together to accomplish? He's saying that we, when we work together, can accomplish great things. He says government, on the other hand, is an institution whose sole purpose is to protect us from our own vices. And he's drawing this clear distinction between people being able to work together and the concerns about government intervening in that. He goes on to say, government has its origins in the evil of man and is therefore a necessary evil at best. And he's issuing a caution there. And he goes on to paint the picture and explain why that's the case. He says government's sole purpose is to protect life, liberty, and property, and that a government should be judged solely on the basis of the extent to which it accomplishes that goal. If you look today at how complicated government has, when it was really designed to perform a very simple and basic function, and we've come to accept and come to ask government to do so many other things that it wasn't designed to do. He says that man was born into a state of equality, and the distinction that has arisen between kings, or politicians we could say today, and subjects, or the population we would say today, is an unnatural one. He's saying that, look, government wasn't meant to reign over us. Government wasn't meant to run our lives. Government was meant to provide the purpose of protecting life, liberty, and property. He says that at first, in the very beginning, the world was without kings, was without a government. He's going way back because the first form of government was a monarchy. But the ancient Jews decided they wanted a king. This angered God, but he allowed them to have one. And he's talking about the historical value of the Bible and how it ties in to what a proper government should be. He says the practice of monarchy or government originates from sin and is an institution that the Bible and God condemn. He says that hereditary succession, which I think we could identify as corruption today, is an abominable practice. He says that even if people were to choose to have a king, say elections, a democracy, that does not legitimize that the king's child acting as a future ruler, which is tyranny. And we see some of that coming about today through different practices. He says that hereditary succession, which we could label today as corruption, has brought with it innumerable evils such as incompetent kings, corruption, and civil war. And we look at what's going on today with our incompetent leaders, the vast corruption going on in our governments throughout the world, and the war going on, and this is as true now as it's ever been. Then he finally says, the time for change is now, meaning that reliance on these principles is always something to be done in the current moment, something never to be let go of. If you would like to check the original manuscript and you want to read through everything that Thomas Paine wrote, I have it on my website at ChristopherScottShow.com. The original book is posted there. You can see the entire thing. You can read it from beginning to end. It's free, and you can read it right on the website. And here's the problem with that book, though. It's the problem with how Thomas Paine wrote it, not what he wrote. It's a problem in exactly how it was written, that it was written 250 years ago, and you can't understand it. That's why I translated it. If you'd like to read Common Sense by Christopher Scott, you can order that on my website at ChristopherScottShow.com, or you can go to Amazon, just search Common Sense by Christopher Scott. Whether you read the free original manuscript or my new translated version, you'll be glad you did. It's a fantastic book.